Hello and welcome to another jungle video, and in this slightly more condensed and less intense video, I want to talk about one of the most fundamental aspects to climbing, to winning, to improving, all of these things that differentiate essentially low elo from high elo to challenge junglers, and that's capitalizing on mistakes, punishing the enemy jungler such that their impact is negligible. What I mean by that is not necessarily, a very blatant low elo kind of dumb mistake, but maybe just a bit of misdirected pathing, maybe a bit of hesitation. Any form of that in a challenger game can end up with the game being very one-sided. Now, the further down the MMRs you go, obviously those mistakes are more forgiven, and that's kind of what I want to talk about. So let's look at a brief example, a generic example that sort of outlines what I'm talking about before we look at a more mid-MMR example and then finish off with a challenger one where you can see the differences in how these mistakes are used to completely destroy games. So in this very basic opening example, we have a Warwick jungle, we have an enemy Elise jungle, pretty standard matchup. There was a little level 1 invade, sort of just seeing what could be done, but nonetheless a ward was placed into the Elise's red pit. This bit of information is very crucial. Now, even if you didn't have this information, the things we're going to talk about would still be possible. You don't need to have a ward there. The Warwick will do a full blue side clear before heading to the red buff. But while Warwick is doing his blue and gromp, and you see the Elise on the red buff, it's important you click on your minimap physically, have a look, see which direction she heads. This gives you an indication of where her pathing might lead her. The fact that she's heading up towards the raptors means that she's going to be on the top side, at least that's what you expect. However, we skip forward and you'll see Warwick finishes his red buff, heads to mid lane to look for a gank before that scuttle spawns, but of course it's Talia, so that's a tougher lane to gank, and Elise shows up on the bottom side over an excellent tribush ward by the pike. Now, if you're in the middle of your gank, it's obvious you're not going to be able to necessarily click on the minimap and notice this right away. However, even if you don't, it's very obvious that she went from red to raptors to krugs. There would be no other reason for that particular pathing, and she wouldn't have had the time to go up to a blue and all the way back down to the bottom, and also if she did that, you'd have to question her sanity. So a mere threat of the E-flash from Warwick onto the Talia burns her flash. That's absolutely perfect. You're just looking for a little bit of pressure. Once her flash is down, it makes it much easier to gank later on. You fall to the top side where that crab will be spawning. But as you do that, Elise shows up on the bottom side of the mid lane. This pathing is particularly careless and not well thought out whatsoever. There's no consideration for where the Warwick started, there's no consideration for what you're giving up by hanging around so long on the bottom side, and there's no consideration for the time efficiency of jungle pathing by going red raptors krugs. Now, as soon as this happens in your game, please click on the minimap, have a look at the Elise, press tab, look at the CS. You're going to see 12 CS from the bottom side camps, you're going to see no blue buff on her, and that means her blue buff is free to take. Obviously, this is all possible because of the Kiana ward. However, even if she did get ganked by the Elise, that still would have given you time to steal the blue and get out. But because of that ward and the fact that you see Elise pathing into the Warwick's blue side jungle, well, that means, well, now I've got time to steal the whole blue side, and the fact that your camps are down there means that Elise, if she doesn't get a kill, will get absolutely nothing of it. You have to punish her inefficient pathing, you have to punish her greed, and completely destroy her experience gains. Make sure you leave a ward behind in the blue side jungle. This helps tracking. One ward that gives you tracking of a jungler should snowball into 2, 3, 4 wards and basically let you have complete control of their game plan. Now, as Warwick, you do have the W. If you press the W to help track the Elise to see where she's going next, you can pin out the fact that she's gone to the tribush, she's gone up to your krugs. You don't want to go fight her because your top laner has died. And because you pinged it out, because you typed it in chat, the Aatrox should really not be tipping into a wave where the Elise can very easily flank and kill you again. So that's the Aatrox's error. He should not have put himself in that position, and the Elise is punishing him for that. But as the Warwick now, because you have fast rotations, you can move on up, you can grab yourself a double kill in that situation also. Elise here played like a low elo jungler. She pretended you didn't exist, and she pretended that her camps were on some mutual respects grounds untouchable. That's not true. And as soon as someone does anything like this in your games, focus on what can I take from them because of their bad decisions. Now, this can kind of work in a separate situation where you don't have wards and you don't mind that the enemy jungler sees you because you're playing 3D chess while he's playing checkers. It's very typical for Rengars to walk into the enemy red buff with your laner, try and steal that away before anyone gets to the bushes, and if they do face check, it's Rengar, you can get a first blood. So this Lee Sin is your kind of high gold level player, and before everyone in the comments starts whining about how can he be gold, I'm way better than him, I see this level of comment way too much when I talk about versus or comparisons, and it's not right. Start focusing on your own gameplay. Go watch your replays and you'll do a lot of the same things all the time. Anyway, that aside, let's move on. So the Lee Sin wants to do his blue Gromp and then perhaps rotate, get a level 2 gank on the bottom lane. And at this point it's kind of just a meme. I have no clue why bottom laners do not play more reserved, but then again, in this elo range you're not going to see dynamic wave management, you're not going to see level 2 priorities or anything like that. So from the Lee Sin's perspective, from a jungler of this MMR's perspective, it's good to have a nice little bit of early lane impact. You burn sums, you get your bottom lane ahead. However, during this time, Rengar had started as red and, not caring if he was seen or not, sort of just attempted a drive-by in the mid lane and then moved down through the turret and used very good pathing around the backside of his red. The Rengar did this because he knew as he was seen, the Lee Sin would try and invade and take the Rengar's red in kind for losing his own. So the pathing on the Rengar side was very good, and now he waits for a little bit of support backup, knowing that the Lee Sin won't be able to take it too fast at level 2. And then he runs straight into the bush. There's Lee Sin. You got some clunky mechanics, but the Lee Sin ends up flashing away, and that's all he really wanted. Further experience denial. The goal is a 3 buff. The goal is simply to keep track of him and punish his predictability. And that's not necessarily always a mistake, but being predictable as a jungler is actually a mistake. The fact that junglers are so ham-fisted on making sure they don't get 3 buffed makes him predictable in their early game pathing as they get a little bit desperate. And without even paying attention to pathing, the Rengar moves across the mid lane, which means he was seen. He didn't pay attention to the minion waves, means he would have been seen by the red team. The Lee Sin doesn't notice this. He's focusing on that crab. You know, when you're farming crab, it's intense work. You don't look at the minimap, you don't notice anything else. Focus on the crab. But sarcasm aside, this is the Lee Sin's mistake. The predictability of earlier burnt his flash. Sucks, but it's not the end of the world. This, however, is a big mistake. Because he missed the Rengar crossing the mid lane and didn't think about what his intentions would be, and the Rengar was kind of predicting, hey, Lee Sin's gonna definitely do wolves, definitely do top crab, and definitely look to steal my blue, that means as Rengar, you hold all the cards. When you can predict and know where the enemy jungler is, and they are oblivious, didn't notice, or don't know where you are, you can make the play, and even if it's clunky, maybe your mechanics aren't that fresh, you can still grab the kill on the Lee Sin. You 3 buff him, he doesn't have a flash, and because of forcing him into these predictable behaviors and punishing his mistake of a lack of awareness, you've also kept him away from your lanes, gank free, which cannot be oversold. When you have all winning lanes, it's the same thing. You want to go into their jungle, use the lane priority, use your aggression to keep them from ganking those pushing lanes. The same principle here, just a little bit in reverse. And now, if we move away from simply very obvious mistakes and we move to a challenger game, where the mistakes aren't necessarily that obvious, it's more about your decision making, your predictability, the enemy jungler's advanced reads on what you're going to do next. And to illustrate this, we skip forward a little bit and you have a Taliyah gank on the mid lane. The Draven is very low. The Qiyana is currently doing the Scuttle Crab on the bottom side. Now when you look at the situation, the Pyke's bottom lane is pushing in, which means as the red team's jungler, you're not going to have assistance from your bottom lane, and you know that if you rotate to help the Draven here, who doesn't have a lot of HP, you're gonna get 3v2 collapsed on. So the decision in this situation is, should you actually rotate to save the Draven? Now, most of the time everyone will do so, but maybe you don't use all your spells to try and stop them, and then you actually end up being forced to flash under the tower. Not only that, but once the Pyke rotates up, Draven actually ends up dying to the Taliyah Pyke combo anyway. There could be an argument for saying, well, here comes the Pyke, you have low resources, I'm not going to be able to save you without the cost being very high, I'm going to fall back, leave the scuttle, just take my blue, secure my own jungle. Essentially recognizing that you're going to lose this battle, but in the interest of gaining more resources for the next one. Well, ignoring that entirely, because she showed up with no red buff, because she had 12 CS, she didn't have a blue buff, this tells you everything you need to know about the situation. She did red Raptor's Krugs, looked for a gank in the top lane. In this case, they did actually see her, so they know this. Went back to base, and he was trying to save her mid laner. Because of this decision, Taliyah takes her blue, Taliyah takes the Gromp, Taliyah can fall down to the Scuttle Crab, and this is where the big mistake comes in. The Qiyana really should have known she was going to lose her blue, at the very least maybe even her Gromp, and definitely that Scuttle Crab because of her decision to rotate in that situation. And so trying to force things by getting a gank off on the bottom lane at that particular moment proves to be the absolute worst decision because the Taliyah is right there. Why are you going to the bottom lane when you know the Taliyah is there? Now again, this is mistake number 2, decision number 2, and in Challenger, that is met with absolute no remorse. Not only does Taliyah get all these kills and get rubber banded experience on her Krugs and Raptors, which she cleared first at the beginning of the game, she can also clear her Wolves and Gromp, basically a full camp sequence clear, go back to base with her disturbing amount of gold, is basically almost level 7, and because the red buff is spawning now, she knows that the enemy red buff will also be spawning now, and she knows after the counter gank on the bottom lane, the Qiyana would have had no choice but to go back to her top side to get those rubber banded camps, the Krugs and the Raptors, and try and take her red buff. However, we obviously don't have first-person perspective, but the top laners are engaged in a 1v1 and are both very, very low. The Qiyana made the decision to forego doing her red buff to try and rotate, even if it's behind the tower. Yes, she is a jungle main, to try and get a kill there and get a bit of wave push, catch up experience in that way, with the assumption that the Taliyah would be on her own red buff spawn. Obviously, the Taliyah knows where Qiyana has to be and what her decisions will be based upon her location. Rotates up, uses her ultimate, and basically level 8 to level 5 after getting a triple kill in the top lane. This game is well and truly over. You can do whatever you want as Taliyah. Invade, steal, take herald, take dragons, push towers. There is nothing the enemy jungler can do, and it's all because of an ill-advised rotation when the enemy bottom lane was rotating up as well, and a pike no less, an EU West pike, and then making two very, very predictable ganks because the enemy jungler knew where you were, and when you're predictable and you make bad decisions, they should be punished, and they can cost you games very easily. So to bring this together, the punchline is punish enemy jungler mistakes, be on the lookout for the location and what you can take from them, and if the enemy jungler is being predictable, don't forget to take advantage of their decisions. Thank you very much for watching. Obviously a little bit more generic, a little bit more informal, but something that I feel people aren't really doing as much as they could be doing when enemy junglers are out of position. Please don't forget to like, share, and comment if you enjoyed, and please subscribe, help us get to 100,000 subs if you enjoy this content and would like to see more. And as always, I will see you all in the next tutorial.